Hello, and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life, simplify them. And today we are really building, expanding upon our conversations recently, all about better communication. You know, being a great leader, in my opinion, one of the best parts of a great leader is somebody who is an excellent communicator. And I dare say it's not just the words that come out of your mouth, but it's your ability to interpret verbal and nonverbal cues with whoever you're communicating with. So I want to talk about that today and simplify it down. My special guest is Kristin Bock. She is a professional speaker, a charisma consultant, and founder of Body Language Blueprints. She actually helps professionals become what she calls social Legos, people who click with others by using body language and nonverbal cues to build trust and connection. She's also the creator of The Calm Charismatic. It's a newsletter for quietly magnetic humans everywhere. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Kristin Bock. Hey, Kristin.
Well, hello. You had me at your Dolly Parton poster.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we're going to have such a great conversation today because you and I are very, very similar in personality and style. And here's the truth. You know, when it comes to communication, you just assume that people who know how to do this are the extroverts of the world, the people persons, like all of that. But what we're going to talk about today is not just for the ones that, you know, this comes natural to, right?
Exactly. And thank you for shining a light on that, because honestly, that is how I got into this line of work. Is I didn't have those skills and I needed to figure it out.
Yeah. And so in your opinion, what makes a great communicator? Let's start there.
Well, there's a lot of things. And I like to ask people, like, who is that person in your life? Like when you say, who's the most charismatic person you know? Usually there's something that bubbles up for you. There's that person, that friend, or someone at work, etc. But when you start to list, like, what is it about them, rarely is it the hard skills. Like every now and then I'll get something really tactical or technical, but it's always how the person makes you feel, how they show up. They're funny, they're warm, they always, make you feel smart. Whatever the thing is, it comes down to really how they're making you feel. So I think that is what a lot of our conversation will be about today, is how do you become more effective in showing up and impacting the other person?
Yeah. And I want to look at today's conversation in the lens of communications at work, right? And obviously these things bleed over to your personal life and with your family, if you've got kids or otherwise. But let's focus on how to be a better communicator at work. So how did you become the body language expert that you are now?
Well, let's go back to the beginning. I was born really insecure and awkward, shy. And so I always say I would love to be like Jack Black, but I'm not. I'm not that person. And people think charisma, etc., is that bubbly extrovert. Yes, but there are many different flavors. So it started with me just being really shy, not knowing how to interact. Went to college, got my degree in psychology, was really interested in people and behaviors. Took a job at a group home working with adults with cognitive developmental disabilities, many of whom were nonverbal. And so that was just this beautiful training ground without me even realizing it, where I got really good at kind of anticipating behaviors and kind of cutting it off before it became a problem, because I was observant and I could figure out, and I could see how one staff could do very well with someone and another staff couldn't. So fast forward to, I was invited to be the trainer for the company. And that's when I had the moment of, I don't know how to stand in front of a group. I'm terrified. And that's really where I started in earnest to get into body language, because I needed to figure out how to share my message. So I did that, and it really started changing my life.
Fun fact, I don't know if I've ever really shared this on the podcast. I was insanely shy, insanely introverted as
Yes.
a child. I mean, truly, my parents would make fun
Right.
of me. I would prefer to sit in my closet with my accordion doors shut and
Hmm.
play with my toys or draw all day long. Totally fine. Didn't need to talk
Yeah.
to any other human outside of the world. And so now here I am, some odd many years later, doing podcasts and public speaking and things like that. So I always think it's so interesting. The people that are
Hmm.
out in the world teaching the things that people need to know the most are sometimes
Yeah.
the things that they really struggled with early on. And so we want
Right.
to help others avoid the pain and suffering of
Yeah.
earlier days, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's truly why I'm passionate about it, because it was a self-help tool. Like I needed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, yeah, I want to share that with other people that are like, I could never do that.
You
So like
teach what
networking
you,
where you break out into
yeah.
a cold sweat. Yeah.
Yeah, you teach what you want to learn the most, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
as you've become more and more observant of other people's body language and then teaching other people about this, let's talk about that and break it down. Let's talk about the how. So, what are
Mhm.
the most impactful body language cues that someone could use to instantly become a more compelling communicator?
Right.
Is there a formula to this or
Well, so my company name is Body Language Blueprints because I
so
feel
the
like
answer is yes.
yes, there's a map, there's a playbook. So first of all, I guess I would say I want people to realize that first impressions happen instantaneously. Like the science is robust. There's different, studies. So kind of pick your study, but it's really seconds, 3 seconds or less, probably closer to one, where your brain is making an impression. And if I go back to you know, elementary, middle school, high school days, I was the person who was very quiet, wearing all black, and I thought I was invisible. Nope. I think people just thought I was creepy. And so when I started to really dive into the science and learn more, I was like, oh, first impressions don't happen the moment you speak. They happen the moment someone sees you. So we really need to be aware of this. And I'll just say the imagery that has helped me and that I use when I teach is I like to imagine the world like a comic book where we're all walking around. And here, this is where I turn into Carrot Top. Speech bubbles over our heads. So if you're listening, I'm holding up a speech bubble. That has been a really grounding visual for me, that when I'm talking with someone, I'll often just try and imagine their speech bubble. So understanding, yep, that because that allows you to tap into empathy and emotion and just really get a good sense of where you're at in the conversation. All right. So, but as far as tips, playbook, there's 3 that I want to highlight. Okay, so the first one is hands. And if you're watching this, you can see I'm using my hands. I'm saying there's 3 tips. Here's the first one. I'm using hand gestures. Hands are incredibly important. Whether you know it or not, our brain is scanning for hands. That's a big tell. It's indicating friend or foe. So if you go back to cave people days, is this person coming at me a friend or a foe? Do they have a rock or a spear? We need to know that. So I'm just going to do this, Mary. If I put my hands behind my back and I talked the whole time like this, actually I can start to feel it a little bit in my voice. It becomes a little lower, a little slower. But after a while, you'd be like, why? What is she doing? And then when I bring them out, you're like, oh, okay. So our brain is just sort of constantly scanning. It's like that software program in the background. All of this to say, I want you to use your hands when you speak, and I want you to do it purposefully. So there's a lot regarding this, but I would say kind of what they call, like, if you think of baseball and like the strike zone, keeping your hands in the strike zone is a pretty safe default. If I go outside of that, this is a little bit more energetic, right? So I have something I want to share. If I put them at my sides, this is a little bit like take a beat. There's no right or wrong. It's how you want to use it. So this gets into theater. Trial lawyers love this. So it's how you use them. But I will say the research really shows that competent people charismatic people, leaders, tend to be very specific with their movements. So they're not doing this kind of thing. They're saying, we have 3 things we need to cover. Okay, and then I'm using my hands. We're doing this in steps. Our numbers are soaring. They're using really intentional cues. So,
all right, like I want to pause you there because I think there's so much to this, which is really juicy and exciting. I think at the end of the day, what you were saying at the beginning is about safety, right? Do I feel safe in communication with the other person? Now, if a person is outside of what you call the strike zone, wildly flailing their hands and like things are going like, wow, this feels like chaotic and it feels, super energized and I don't feel safe necessarily unless I wonder, unless if both people talk in wild, crazy, big hands, then maybe they're mirroring one another. But I think most people wouldn't feel quote unquote safe, right? And that's at the base. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's at the very base of the foundation of things. Is that what we're talking about here?
A little bit. Well, I like to tell people that when you get that gut feeling, like someone's really salesy or schmoozy or whatever, it's usually their words and something with their body language that isn't lining up, and our brain catches it, even if we can't name it. If you've ever read the book, The Gift of Fear, they talk about that. And so, yes, it could be the person's brand, Mary. Like they're just more over. Think of comedians or like Robin Williams or whatever, who's just a little bit more expressive. That's who they are.
Yeah.
If I'm having a conversation with a person, I might try and mirror that, but not at that level.
Know your audience, right? And I think that there is something to being your true, authentic self. If you are a boisterous, extroverted, bubbly person, what you're saying is not dampen that down, but just know the room and know what you're trying to get across, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Another thing that I do, I picked this up many, many years ago as a public speaker, and it's so dumb, but I do it. I'll share it. Is if you have, let's say you're on a Zoom call and your screen is mirrored, and I'm trying to make a point about 3 things. I will start here, and I'll go, number 1 is here, number 2 is here, number 3 is there.
Yes.
And that sounds so dumb. I go right to left because it's a mirrored screen, and whereas your brain normally thinks I go left, middle, right. And again, it's just a visual representation to get your point across as well.
Right. Yeah. Now you're getting into theater where stage work, even on the stage, if you want to go back in time, it's sort of the reverse for you, or coming forward, going back. Yeah.
And these are the little things, again, that I think being a great communicator is being a great storyteller, and captivating the audience to pay attention, to put their phone down, to singularly focus on you, the presenter, whether you're in a pitch meeting or just, even the stand up on a Wednesday. It's not anything exciting. You still need to be a great communicator at those as well.
Yes. And it's a gift for the listener because you're making it easy for them to comprehend. So I'm leaning in when I'm sharing an important point. That is cueing you. Oh, this one matters, or that pay attention. So it's being really empathetic and putting yourself in the audience, in the other person's mind.
Yeah. And another thing you talk about is your digital charisma. Tell us, what does that mean, and how can we project it in, say, our emails or Zoom calls or online communication?
Yes. Well, that ties into first impressions as well, which is why I'm obsessed with it, because we think about how we show up in person, or we tend to give that more thought. But I feel like this sort of untouched cat. I mean, people are thinking about it, but I'm really thinking about it. So this is your font, your email signature, literally the words you're choosing in your emails, how you're texting. Are you using? Is it GIF or GIF? I never know. I don't.
I'm a GIF girl, not a GIF. GIF is only peanut butter.
So it's paying attention to your Zoom background. So you've got, Dolly, you've got some cues there that are conversation starters. When we first jumped on the call, I'm like, Dolly Parton, hello, right? I've got speech bubble bookshelves that people will comment on. I'm cueing you non-verbally that I read. I talk about communication, and I'm trying to give kind of a fun vibe. I've got my hello there. I've got my little logo, So without saying a word, we can start to really curate and craft and show up charismatically and get attention in the digital world. That's very hard.
Yeah.
A lot of
And
noise.
I feel like in this day and age, especially in hybrid and remote workplaces, your background, where you work from is incredibly important in how you present yourself in meetings. And I understand sometimes people work in Manhattan studios and they're tiny little apartments, and it's really hard to hide the bed behind you. But if you are in a Zoom meeting with your team, or a senior executive jumps in and here you are trying to present a big idea, and I see your messy laundry behind you on your bed, what kind of impression is that going to give me? And I hate to say that that's the reality of how the world works, but it's how the world works, right?
Yeah. Well, and I like to say, the saying is, don't judge a book by its cover, but we do.
Totally do.
At least our brain is. So this is a corner of a room. So, and that actually, corners are a little bit more interesting. But so it doesn't have to be a whole space, but give thought to how you're showing up. Yeah.
And, I think let's take it from an assessment point of view. In some companies and some corporations, you might be asked to do a 360 interview, which means, you assess what you think of how you're showing up. And then they ask your peers, and then they ask your boss, and then they may ask somebody cross-functionally. I always think that those are so fascinating, because your perception of like, oh, I'm amazing, I'm super awesome at blah, 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 blah. And then you get the assessments from other and you go, oh, I had no idea that that's the perception. It's not necessarily that it's true, but it's the perception of who you are in the workplace. And I think I think it's really humbling, and it's such a good idea to do a bit of an audit on those things, and always be open to learning and evolving and growing. And I think that's where you start to go, oh, the set design of where I work is incredibly important if I want to be perceived as a leader and somebody who is worth listening to, right?
Yes. No, absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of competent people are really striving for perfection and thinking my ideas will stand for themselves, my work stands for itself. And yes, but the reality is the person that can make the connections, et cetera, is going to have the advantage. And so it isn't always just your work. If you can't compellingly relay your idea or show what you're adding to the team, people can see, but you have to tell them too.
Yeah. And I mean, I've worked in organizations where I've only literally met my senior leaders 4 times a year in person. Everything else is online. It's a video call. So you're building those relationships in, these very different times where you're not building that trust and respect at the water cooler in the morning kind of session. So this is a priority. So let's shift gears. Let's talk about vocal power. How can people harness their vocal power to sound more confident? And what strategies would you help give them to avoid habits like upspeak that could really undermine their credibility? And first off, define what upspeak is.
Upspeak, and I'm going to want to, because you do this, you're on a podcast, you have some radio background. I'll be curious to get your opinions too. But upspeak is where you're going up at the end of a sentence. So it's like asking a question. My name is Kristin. I charge $500. You're begging for a negotiation. And people really get in the habit of doing that. They don't even know that they do it anymore. So that is something you want to ask for feedback on and listen to yourself. As a speaker, that's something I work on as well. Just even leaving messages for people, like practice when you're leaving messages. Am I pausing? Am I doing these things? But here's what I wanted to share. When we get nervous, we tend to speak at a higher rate, and we're taking a breath in. So if I take a breath in and say hello, that sounds a little more nervous, right? If I take a breath in and I speak on the out breath, so let me try this again. If I go, hello, that's a little bit more relaxed. So if you practice, I'm not on the phone a ton, but when I get a call, I've cued myself to take a breath in and I'll answer on the out breath.
That's
Or
good.
any kind of negotiations or anything you find yourself a disagreement where you're going higher, take a breath in, speak on the out breath. It's relaxing your vocal cords. So I'm just curious from a radio background what you've been taught.
Breath work is everything. It literally is, and I get nervous still all the time. Don't think that this is something you just like, I'm a master at it, tick, it's done. No, it's literally, you have to utilize breath work, best practices and tools to get your nervous system regulated. And when your nervous system is regulated, then you can speak like a normal human being, right? Rather than the super excited, it feels really high up in your throat kind of bubbly excitement. So breath work literally just means 3 intentional breaths. Just you can use like box breathing where you breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold, breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold. 3 of those helps you get your heart rate down and your breathing where it needs to be able to, channel what your voice needs to do. Yeah.
Also pauses. That's something that I've really had to, again, work on. My filler word is so. I say so. And it's still too much. But just taking a pause, that's also a leadership trait that it's showing the person, I'm so confident I can sit in this silence for just a second while I process, which is a good thing.
Oh man, pauses are so hard. They really are. And it is a muscle to, practice and build over time, because I think anybody will say, like, anyone listening to us right now goes, man, it's so awkward. Those awkward silences. I just want to fill them with words and words and words and words and words. It's like, actually you can put a punctuation, you can put a period on a thing by shutting up.
Yeah. So no, that's powerful stuff, is taking that beat.
Yeah. And it's silly little things as well. I keep honey and lozenges in my desk. I think about honey teas, things like that help, make sure that your vocal cords are right where they need to be. Those things help me a lot.
Limiting dairy. I didn't have any dairy today.
Oh, it's so hard though.
I know, but I'll have a toasted cheese when I'm done.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
So do you, any introverts that are out there in the world that are like, well, yeah, I know I'm supposed to do this stuff, but I just would prefer to stay in my cave and not do any of it or practice it. What would you do to encourage them, in trying these skills and practicing at their next meetings?
Well, okay. So I'm going to circle. So we talked about hands. There's 2 other little skills I want to cover. So the second one is open body language. That was another game changer for me. By open body language, I mean that you're not blocking with your arms. You're not hiding behind a purse or a desk or an object. Like, you're very open. And that was something, so the research there really shows that people, this is like research like at bars and things, it's not the most attractive person that gets the most attention. It's the person with the open body language, because you're cueing others. You can talk to me, I'm relatable, I'm approachable. It's much harder if you're talking with someone else or crossing your arms. So that really was incredibly helpful to realize, oh, I've been sending these messages of stay away. And it was my own insecurity. Yeah.
Interesting.
Right? It would have been helpful to know in my younger days.
And so then what's the third one?
So the third one is fronting. So we're right now on the camera, we're fronting, we're fully facing someone. This is facing your top, your torso, and your toes towards someone. This is nonverbal respect. It's saying you have my full attention. How you see it virtually not working is when people have multiple screens and they're looking at their other screen and the camera is facing a different direction and they're not able, they're talking and they're not looking at the camera. It's so frustrating. Same as in real life. So I'm fully facing the person. This is really great to do, to practice with family members, friends, to, if I'm on my phone and my kid comes home, if I actually put the phone down, look at them and say, how was your day? That feels very different than if I'm looking at my phone saying, how was your day? So it's giving that nonverbal respect. I feel like people start to pay attention. Now, if I do this for prolonged periods of time, you'll be like, wow, back off, lady. But initially, like to engage, those are really good skill, like kind of foundational skills to have, are using your hands, fronting, and the open body language.
Do you know what's so funny, Kristin? And I know you've probably heard this a million times over. This is not rocket science.
No.
And it's so simple, yet we all forget it. I can tell you there was a meeting I did earlier this week. I'll be honest with my Girl Scout honor here, where I did do the thing where I looked at my second screen and I knew my camera was over here. And it's like, oh, geez, like these are simple things that we just have to remember to do over and over and over to build that muscle, right?
Right. Well, and you can't always reconcile it. I have a stand desk and I have an iPad and I take notes and I'm looking down. And so I try really hard to, when I first pop on a call, say, I'm going to be taking notes. So if I'm looking down, please know I'm just taking notes. So you can say, I'm going to be looking at my other screen because that's where my information is, but you have my full attention. And then trying, when you're talking, to look at the person.
So this kind of leads me to a different question. Let's say, asking for a friend. You're in a meeting room in person and you're presenting and you're trying to get your point across, but there's somebody who is clearly doing multiple things. They're on their computer, they're typing emails, they're checking their phone. Like they're not giving you the nonverbal cue of eye contact, and they're not really participating in the conversation. When you say, hey, let's brainstorm about blah, 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 they're not really engaging. How do you course correct that? Because as a public speaker and as a presenter, I just interpret that as disrespect. Am I wrong to think that?
There's so many variables. There could be a really important message they're responding to, etc. I mean, so you don't know. And as a speaker, sometimes I'll think, oh, that they didn't pay attention at all. That was terrible. And that's the person who's coming up after saying, that really made an impact. So you don't know what they're thinking about, what's going on in their life. This is awkward, but sort of the pause, like just sort of wait, while they're doing multitasking, and they'll get the message of, oh, it's quiet. I need to tune in. And they'll probably say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just responding to an email. And then put that down. You can, again, like shutting a computer, putting your hands on the table, putting your pen down and just sort of waiting. Those are cues like I'm waiting or I'm done.
Yeah. It's tricky because I feel like the nuance of that is that, especially in this day and age, some people just feel so overloaded, so, too many responsibilities on their shoulders. So they're having to multitask in meetings. But I think the reality of what studies have said now is that multitasking is such a myth. Doing singular task, focused singularly, is actually how you get stuff done more productively. But it's hard. It's hard as a presenter. It's hard as somebody who's trying to get a point across to be in a room where people are not giving you the cues back that they're listening, capturing the information.
Right. And that's kind of the secret of it all, is we have to be aware of our cues. The person might not be. I talk a lot about RBF, resting bothered face. And it's so I have it. Thank you, Mom. And it's when your face is relaxed, the corners of your mouth can turn downward, and sometimes the corners of your eyes. It gives you a bit of a mad, irritated, sad look. And it's literally just your face is relaxed. We need to be aware of that. And that really became apparent to me in 2020, when we started doing more virtually. I realized that on Zoom, that was my face, which is not the face you want to maybe talk to. So could I do that for an hour? Like be smiling for an hour? No. But I can be intentional. And when I'm listening or I want to give a listening cue, I can tilt my head, I can nod, I can give a little smile. I could even do a vocalization to cue the other person. When people are unaware of that, that's social quicksand. That's it. And I'm going back to a really old study, the still face experiment. Have you heard about that with the babies and the moms? This is, oh gosh, I need to know my facts. But mothers and babies were taken into, experiment lab, and the mothers were told to interact with their babies And then they were given a cue and they still were looking at their baby, but they couldn't do any kind of facial expression. And within seconds, the babies are picking up on it. They're looking at it. Then they start to fuss. They pull back. They eventually start crying. It's painful to watch. But it's just, that's how we're wired to, pay attention to other people, to the cues. And when we don't get them, incredibly stressful.
This leads me to a different thought, because I feel like those that are our coworkers that are in the neurodivergent community, they communicate and process these cues differently. So what practical tips do you recommend for communicating effectively with these kinds of coworkers?
Well, okay, so that was my world. There was some cognitive disabilities, but I'm working with a gentleman right now who would identify being on the spectrum, is a software engineer, incredibly bright, having a very, very hard time finding a job. Part of it is market. Part of it is he doesn't know how to network, and he's wanting to do it all, just like send a resume and get a job, and he'll get a second interview, and that's when the wheels come off. Because so we're working with, you have incredible strengths and you need to own that narrative. So when you go in, they might be picking up on there are some differences. So you need to take control of that and say, you may have noticed that, I process things a little bit differently, which makes me excellent at X, Y, and Z, but I'm probably the person you don't want planning the holiday party, So add a little humor, whatever, like you're saying, well aware, but still kind of taking control of it, especially from an HR perspective. You can't ask about that.
Of course. Yeah. So I think that's interesting of how to, frame it for others if you are neurodivergent. But then let's say you're not, and you are, on the giving end of, okay, I've got a neurodivergent coworker who takes every single word I say very, very, very literally. How do I navigate that?
Asking them, what's your preferred way to communicate? So I've asked this gentleman, and he's like, I like emails because I can process and think about it. Great. So I'm not going to just jump on a call with him. Asking for feedback too. Like just being a little bit more direct on like, how did that land for you? Can I answer any questions? How does this make you feel? Any questions moving forward? Just checking in and understanding. I want to just tie in eye contact a little bit. That's often really hard for someone who's neurodiverse because their eyes don't stay still. Understanding that about them, that's not being rude or avoidant. It's really hard for them to do and still stay focused. They probably focus better when they're not making eye contact. The one thing, and this is universal for anyone communicating, is we like it when people, like I'm talking and then I'm sort of like accessing a thought, I'm looking away. That's a good thing, as long as when I come back, I'm making eye contact when I end my sentence. It's a bit of a power move, but it's also very helpful for both parties, that if they're having a hard time, they can be looking in different directions and talking, but just always ending with checking in with you, making that eye contact.
That's so interesting. And I feel like this is such a important and critical skill to build right now, because there are more and more folks in the workplace that are on the spectrum, and it more than I've ever experienced before previously. And maybe people are on the spectrum 20 years ago and they just didn't know, but it's becoming more prevalent now. And one of the things that I've run into with a couple of coworkers on the spectrum is they've, point blank said, hey, I'm just not very good at emotional intelligence and empathy and all of the squishy stuff. Yep. So I know in communication, we talked about at the top, like the way you build relationships is to talk about everything but work. How was your weekend? You doing anything fun tonight? What movies you're watching? And sometimes I find folks that are on the spectrum really struggle to do this kind of chit chat and things like that. What recommendations do you give there to build those relationships? In maybe a different way that really connects with them.
Right. Well, okay. So interesting you say that, because when I first started working with this gentleman, he's like, I just don't know how to do those things, that I'm part of a team, but I always feel like I'm outside of the team. I'm like, well, you have to understand the conversational bids. Like when I say, oh, I was picking apples this past weekend, that's your cue to ask me about apples. Or like I'm giving you crumbs that you can pick up. And he's still kind of reconciling in his head why it matters. And I'm like, you have to figure out why it matters. I'm telling you it does, but you have to figure out why it matters, but it does matter to me. Like I want you to know little pieces, so you need to also offer those crumbs. Oh, you have a dog. Oh, you went this place on the weekend. That's how you start to build those connections, even if it's a really low priority for you. It matters to the other person.
For sure, because that's how you build the two pillars of trust and respect in that dynamic relationship. And in my opinion, when you've got real strong trust, two ways, not just one person trusting the other person, and the other one's like, whatever, but trust and respect, that's two ways you build that firm foundation. And you do become a very powerful communicator because you get work done, right?
Yeah. But I would be afraid to just ask the person, like, how do you respond best? What works for you, and then just being really direct or asking. That's transparent.
And a muscle to build and practice and fumble and make mistakes over time. It's repetition builds mastery. If you guys are curious about Kristin and the work she does out in the world, I highly, highly recommend checking out her website. It's called bodylanguageblueprints.com. And all the resources, everything we talked about today will be in the show notes. So you just go over to the simplifiers.com. You'll find links to her website, her LinkedIn, so you can get connected with her directly and all of that. Now, you have this newsletter called The Calm Charismatic. Tell me more about that.
Well, because I'm not the bubbly extrovert, I can play one on TV, but I twice a month I send out a very short newsletter, which is just like an observation, a role model, something I observed, showing how you can be charismatic in real life, in the digital world. It's sort of me observing the world and sharing those tips. So it's fun. I try really hard to make it engaging, exciting, but also useful.
Love it. Well, we'll have the link in the show notes if you guys are curious about that newsletter, and you can sign up right there. It's all free over at thesimplifiers.com. So, Kristin, as we wrap up, there's a couple of questions I like to ask everyone that comes on the podcast in rapid fire. So here we go. What's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
What is inspiring me is I'm reading the book Humor That Works. It's by Drew Tarvin, who is a software engineer, and he has just figured out and really broken down. Actually, he's got a second book, The Humor Playbook, which had me at hello, like a plan. Yes, I would love that. But it's just showing how you can build connection through humor. So I'm really compelled by it because that's a bit of digital charisma. He's connecting, teaching kind of the basics of humor, not so you can be a stand-up, but so you can write a bio that's interesting or memorable, about page. You can reach out in your emails, etc. So I'm really into that, so much so that I've actually hired him to look over my newest keynote.
Amazing. We will link both of those books up in the show notes over at thesimplifiers.com. So tell me, who's somebody in your network, somebody you know personally, you just feel is up to brilliant things? If we could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast, who would that be?
Well, that's a really hard choice, but I want to lift up Nora Burns. Nora Burns is a fellow speaker, and she is just up to great things. She's the leadership expert, and what I think is interesting about her is she's just really rolled up her sleeves. She's got She does the undercover employee and the undercover candidate, where she's gone to over 350. She's applied and been hired to that many jobs, and then sits in the break room, hears the stories, works firsthand, and gives that juicy feedback. And she's got a podcast lessons or stories from the break room, where she's sharing all that information, which whatever, it's intriguing.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so cool, right? To get the inside scoop of what's really broken at your company. Oof.
Yeah. Right?
We will definitely link her up in the show notes for you guys if you're curious about what Nora's doing out in the world as well.
Yes.
I believe simplicity and gratitude go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
The usual suspects, family, friends, all the, yeah, yes, and. Professionally, I'm really grateful. I'm in 2 different masterminds, and I'm in a really great speaking chapter where they challenge me and they support me. It's people that are 10 steps ahead, that are putting the ladder down, that are sharing information. So I'm really grateful for professionally the people around me. They've made such a big impact on my life.
I love that. So again, you can find Kristin, connect with her on LinkedIn. All the links are in our show notes over at thesimplifiers.com. My last question for you today is this, Kristin. Someone somewhere is listening to you and I right now, and she has got a massive presentation coming up. And she's like, yikes, I am not very good at getting my point across, whether it is in her mind that she's not very good at it, or she just doesn't have very much practice at being a good communicator. What's one thing you could whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
Go to the basics. I would start working on keeping my hands visible and expressive, keeping open body language. So if you're giving a presentation, you're not going to stand behind the podium. And I know that's going to make you sweat, but it's also cueing, I know my stuff so well. I don't need to hide behind this. You can go back and look at notes. That's fine. But yeah, open hand gestures and just experiment. Like do little things with family and friends where you're doing your own experiment. You're not telling them, but just see how things change when you have open body language or you're using more hand gestures or fronting.
Love it.
Yep.
Love it. Kristin, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.